Welcome to the For the Love of Language podcast. I'm Stacy the linguist.
And I'm EJ.
And EJ wants to surprise me with a topic today.
I want to do something different. I want to see what it would look like if us two linguists got together and we just had a brainstorm of what would it look like if we were to create a language as different from English as possible.
Okay. I have some ideas already.
See, I knew I didn't need to tell you the topic ahead of time.
I mean, there are just like certain things, and you just pull like the opposite of that, you know? So like the first thing that came to my mind is, English is a stress-based language. So when you're speaking, you put emphasis on certain syllables to distinguish words from one another, right? There are other languages that don't do that, and those are often tonal languages. So first thing I'm going to add is tone.
Oh, that already makes me nervous.
Why?
Because
not like tone.
Tone, I love it. I also don't fully understand it. Well, I understand it from a theoretical standpoint.
Okay.
I'm just not good at it. Let's put it that way.
Yes, you're not good at it because you were raised in a stress-based language, so you have a hard time hearing tone distinctions. But it is possible to train yourself to acquire those distinctions.
It is possible.
Let's make it easy. We won't do a 5-tone system like Mandarin or Cantonese. We'll do a 2-tone system like many Bantu languages in Africa. All right, so we'll just do a high tone and a low tone.
High tone.
Maybe we'll do mid-tone. You usually need a mid-tone in there as well. So we'll do high tone, mid-tone, low tone.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
All right, I think that's a great start.
Fantastic.
I'm gonna do something. I'm gonna go down the phonetics road.
Okay.
So phonetics are the basic sounds of a language, unaltered by their relationship with, the sounds around them. So phonetically, obviously, we're going to put in sounds that don't exist in English. So I think we should add in at least a couple clicks.
Okay. Easily done.
Yeah, definitely a couple clicks. There's a sound I really like in Russian. That's the zh sound.
Mm-hmm.
Which we actually do have in English. We just don't have a letter for it. But like if you say the word Asia, it's that zh in the middle of it. I really like that sound. So I think we should put it in our language.
All right. Let's fuck with the phonology a little bit and allow that word initially.
Ooh.
Because the zh sound, usually you find that word medially, like in badge and Asia, but it's rare for you to say something like zhu, for example.
Right. Yeah, and to just clarify that real quick. So phonology is like how sounds interact with each other. And also when Stacy said badge, that sound is actually an affricate, so it's the combination of the d and the zh together. So if that didn't sound the same to you, it does have the zh as part of the sound.
Yeah.
Let's do a little bit more with phonology. There's letter combinations that are like accepted and work in English, and there's ones that don't. Like in English, you don't actually say like a ts together. Even though we spell tsunami that way, we don't say the t.
Yes.
Or there's other like combinations that wouldn't work in English. So I think you could go 2 different directions here. You could either add in more combinations of like letters and things that don't work in English, or you could simplify English because English does allow consonant clusters.
Yes.
You could say, let's simplify it, make it very different from English by taking that out.
So a better question then, if we're going to allow complex consonant clusters, we're moving closer to African Bantu languages with the addition of tone. Or if we move in the opposite direction, only allowing simple or not allowing consonant clusters at all, we'd essentially kind of we would do something kind of like Hawaiian but with tone. which
Mm,
I'm sure there's a language out there that is like that.
it is fascinating. Let's go the simpler route on this one because I have a
All right.
feeling we're going to be complicating things elsewhere.
Oh, absolutely. So let's minimize the phonology. So we'll add tone for additional contrast. And then we will, we won't allow consonant clusters. How many phonemes would we like? Maybe we should minimize that as well if we want to do something more morphologically complex. Or we have the addition of tone, so we don't necessarily need a whole lot of phonemes because we'll have additional tone contrasts.
What is the minimum viable number of phonemes in a language?
I think the minimum. I think Hawaiian and other Polynesian languages have the minimum, but they are morphologically very dense. So their phonology is very minimum, but their morphology is very maximum in terms of how like agglutinative it is. Agglutinative just means like how much you can stick on to something to add like meaning.
Yeah. I feel like we probably want at least, at least three vowels.
Let's make it 5.
At least five vowels.
That
Okay.
way we get our corner vowels. So we have E, O, A, and aw. And we'll toss in an because schwa usually finds its way into the phonology no matter what,
Usually. Okay.
usually.
Cool. We'll stick with five vowels then.
E, oo. I said O, I meant oo. E, oo, and aw. There we go.
I
Sorry.
mean, if you have like Spanish or, it uses pretty much the vowel letters that we have in English with like a, e, o, u. But yeah, let's stick with just kind of that basic set. Yeah, and then I mean consonants, this gets to like some interesting phonetic stuff we haven't really talked about on the podcast yet, but we
Yeah,
actually obviously as linguists like to dive into the details on everything. So we have
everything.
everything. So we have a classification system for consonants, where you have like fricatives are the ones that you can hold, like I mean,
They're ones that aren't going to show up very well on the podcast because if you pronounce them in isolation, microphones don't like to pick them up. They sound like static.
if I just said static, then I was really trying to say consonants, but here we are.
Those are fricatives.
Those are fricatives. And then you have stops, which are the ones where you basically stop if you're to hold it. Like if you're to say a P sound, there's only a moment where you're actually making that sound.
Yeah, where there's closure and then the explosion of sound comes out. So that's why it's called a stop or a plosive. And usually the
Yes.
P's, the B's, anything where there's just a brief closure and then you move on. So also that includes like K and G and a few others. We would pronounce them in isolation because K and G aren't their actual names or the actual sounds. But for the sake of the microphones that are being used, we're going to just give them names so we don't, so you can hear them or register what we're talking about.
Right. And then you have nasals, which
Mm-hmm.
are obviously ones where you have more sound coming through your nose. So the M sound, the N sound. There's also the eng, more farther back in your throat. There's, plenty of nasals. And there's other ones I'm missing.
Laterals and rhotics. So you have the L sounds and R sounds, which are considered to be semi-vocalic. So you have and the ul, because no matter what there are some languages that are capable of making those unvoiced, but often they have like a vocalic quality to them. You also have like w and y, which have a bit of a vocalic quality to them. They require an additional amount of resonance in their pronunciation.
Right. And I mentioned clicks previously, but I almost left them out here.
Yes. Yeah, clicks. There's about like 5 different kinds of clicks that we've been able to register. So you can do dental clicks with your teeth. You can do palatal clicks. You can do like hard palate clicks, and I think there are some languages that can do soft palate clicks. I think there's also a way to do a bilabial click, but I don't know
Yeah.
how that happens. Bilabial just meaning you do it with your lips.
I believe that's actually basically the kissing sound, is how I've heard it described, where it's like the
Yeah,
that
yeah,
kind of.
yeah. That sounds about right.
But I don't
So
actually
that's
know a language that does clicks in it, so I could be very wrong.
the most like the most popular language that uses clicks is I want to pronounce it correctly, but I can't remember exactly where you put the click. Is Kosa? Kosa? I think it's a palatal click. It's a South African language, very prominent. If anyone knows the comedian and newscaster Trevor Noah,
Oh, yeah, I know who you're talking about.
yeah, Trevor Noah, his first language is Kosa,
Mm,
spelled with an X. So it's Xosa, Kosa. But yeah, that is a language that uses clicks. A
yeah,
lot of African languages will, at least in more the southern part of Africa, utilize clicks in their phonology.
yeah. And then I would also call out another main distinguishing factor between consonants is voicing.
Mhm.
And so voicing is the easiest way to detect it is like if you put your fingers on your neck and you say like a z sound, like in buzz, you can kind of feel your throat vibrating. Versus if you were to say bus without that z, you don't feel the vibration in your throat. That difference is voicing, and so
Mhm.
you'll find that your mouth is in the exact same position for an S and a Z, for a D and a T, for a P and a B. The only difference is that voicing in your throat.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And I will say, unfortunately, that voicing is kind of a mandatory contrast. So that's one of those like linguistic elements that in our imaginary language that we're creating, we're going to have to include, because there is no language that doesn't allow that like has zero voicing contrasts.
Mm.
There's some variety of Berber in Morocco that has a couple of words that are only voiceless consonants, but they're very, very rare. So voicing is something that it's just a natural linguistic property. We kind of require it in order to perceive certain contrasts. So that one we're going
Right.
to have to keep in our imaginary language here.
Fair. I'm totally good with that. Okay, cool. So that was a great phonetics lesson digression from our main mission here.
Mm-hmm. So
So yeah,
we have tone contrast. We're going to doing tone, minimal phonetic inventory, not allowing complex consonant clusters. Anything additional you would like to add in terms of phonology?
no.
Okay. I will, then we can move on to morphology. And I will say this, since we're using like a minimal contrast within the phonology, our morphology is going to have to be a little bit more complex. So
Yes.
our words might be a lot longer and they might have some more like additional meanings to them. Our words might be thicker, so to
Yeah,
speak.
we're probably going to get somewhat agglutinative, have some fun with
Yes.
affixes.
Yes.
So morphology is the pieces of a word.
Hmm.
So if we were to take like basic words in English, you have pieces of words like shun at the end of the word is going to mean that a word is a noun. Or you have s added to a word is a morpheme that indicates plurality.
Hmm.
So you have these pieces of words that can be like, if you were writing it, maybe it's multiple letters, maybe it's a single letter, but it's all these discrete pieces that you put together to form a word.
Yes.
There's rules and things about how they can be put together, what order they're put together in, and all that jazz.
Yes. So in if we're talking about English, English doesn't have a whole lot of like morphological density. We only have like a few prefixes, a few suffixes. They're often to indicate like number or what like type of word it is, whether it's a noun or a verb or an adjective. Where we do not have grammatical gender, which would be something that you would find in the morphology.
And we don't really do cases other than with
Yes.
pronouns.
Mm-hmm.
So cases we use when you change the word he to him to his to indicate like the role in a sentence.
Yes.
We only do that with pronouns. Other languages do that with every single noun. So the word
Yes.
window is going to change if it's the subject of a sentence, if it's the object, if you're moving towards the window, if you're using the window as an instrument. Like
Mm-hmm.
not as a musical instrument but as like a means to do something.
Right.
So there's like, Germanic languages will frequently have around 4 cases. You have the
Mm-hmm.
nominative for the subject, the accusative for the object, the dative for the indirect object or the direction, and the one other that I'm missing.
So you said dative, nominative, accusative. Oh, possessive,
Oh, genitive. Yes.
genitive. Oh yeah, it's genitive. Yeah.
Yeah, so basically possessive.
Mm-hmm.
And then, in Russian and some of the other Slavic languages, you actually have 6 cases. I think Latin had way more than that. So yeah, cases is changing nouns, conjugations is when you're changing verbs.
Yes. Yes. So with that in mind, clearly we're going to have to add case to English.
Yes.
At least more so. At least we're in our bastardized not English language that we're creating. Let's add some case and let's make sure that we extend that case beyond just pronouns.
Yeah. So what that might look like would be like, okay, maybe instead of having separate prepositions like words for, in, of, from, to, maybe we'll instead add a morpheme to the word that you're moving to that indicates what
Yes.
that preposition would mean. So in none of these cases are we just outright adding complexity or removing the complexity. You're just moving the complexity from one
Yeah,
place.
we're just changing the shape of it because ultimately languages do kind of all encode the same amount of complexity. It's just the way that they encode it is different.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, so let's have a bunch of cases. Let's go all out. Should we have like 8, 10?
I think it would be fun. I actually, I was reading a paper about a very interesting language that you find in Georgia, not the state, the country, and it has 5 genders in the language.
Ooh.
Very nice. So I think we should have, maybe we can do like 6 cases, 3 genders.
I'm good with that. Yeah, so usually in 3 gender languages, you would have a masculine, a feminine, and a neuter gender.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in this language, I think it's pronounced sovatush. They have masculine, feminine, neuter, or no, they have masculine, feminine, and then 3 different neutral genders, which are just called like D, K, and J, because that's like the morpheme that they use for those different genders. It's very fascinating.
Right. I mean, that's kind of like in German, they'll usually refer to it as like die, der, das.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So super interesting. Okay.
So yeah, we'll have grammatical gender, we'll have case, which I think we can all encode with affixes, and we're going to need quite a few of those since we're not having any sort of complex consonant clusters. So it looks like we're going to be dealing with a lot of syllables.
Yes,
which will all have tonal quality, and we can distinguish those morphemes also with tone.
All right. Wonderful. Yeah, and an affix is just a prefix or a suffix. It's any kind of thing affixed to a word.
Yes. You can even have infixes, which are, let's add infixes because English doesn't really have infixes, but you often find those in Southeast Asian languages.
Okay, so we're going to be sticking morphemes into the middle of our words, which is fascinating. I love that. Cool. Cool. So we're gonna have three genders. We're gonna have cases. We're gonna have infixes. This sounds good.
Hmm.
Sounds good. What about syntax? Should we dive into that a little bit?
Let's do verb initial.
Okay.
It's like super, super rare to have a verb initial language.
Love it. Okay. So English is SVO, subject, verb, object.
Hmm.
And Stacy wants to start out with verbs instead of with subjects. And
Yes.
then would it be VSO?
Yes. I would say VSO because VOS is probably the least common language out there. Most languages are verb medial or verb final. Those are probably the
Mm,
most common. But yeah, let's do verb initial, subject, object, because that I think is at least attested in a couple different languages.
awesome. So, like, what that would look like if I were to butcher an English sentence, if I were to
Let's
say,
do it.
I eat chocolate, it would be eat I chocolate.
Hmm.
Cool. So yeah, VSO as our, dominant syntactic structure. Is there anything else we should say about syntax?
I'm going to say that we should have strict word ordering. English and other Germanic languages have a tendency for like free word order or word order variation called scrambling, where you can move some words to different positions. So sometimes, especially with things like adverbs, you can say like yesterday I went to the store or I went to the store yesterday. Instead of having that flexibility, let's make it more rigid and say that you have to have a fixed word order.
That's interesting because usually when you have like cases on nouns or some of these other things that we're talking about,
You allow for more word variation,
you
like free
can, like in
variation in word
Russian, you
order.
have like a lot of freedom. You still have tendencies one way or the other. But yeah, we can go with a very fixed word order. And English actually has a more strict word order in a lot of ways than people recognize. Like you have the whole
Yes.
big red apple thing. Like if you say red big apple, people are gonna be like, that just sounds odd.
Yeah, it's most prominent in our adjectives, but yeah, in other Germanic languages, the word order is a lot more free. But for English, for some reason, especially with adjectives, we have to have things in a certain order.
Yeah, it's super, super fascinating. But yeah, okay, I'm good with that. We can have a very, very strict word order. Yeah, let's see. Anything else for syntax?
I mean, we've made the morphology very dense because we decided to simplify the phonology. Syntactically, let me see. Syntactically, we've already included things like case and grammatical gender, which can also like kind of impact how the syntax structure looks. I'm trying to think of what else.
I mean, you could have different things like in English, we switch up word order if you're asking a question, for instance.
Right. All right. No, let's keep it in C2. In C2 means that you maintain the same word order. Let's add a morpheme for questions, kind of like we
Okay,
do
in
in
Chinese, like
Chinese and
Mandarin.
Japanese. Yeah. So we'll just have another. This will just be an extremely morphologically dense language. But yeah. So instead of saying what did you eat yesterday, you would say eat
Yesterday you
yesterday
eat
what?
question marker.
Yes, question marker or the what.
Mm,
So let's keep it in C2 because that'll be very different from English.
cool. I like that. I like that a lot. Because, yeah, in English, we change the word order and we alter the intonation of a sentence
Yes,
coming up at the
yes.
end. But we already have tones in this language.
So you can have tone and intonation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, those things are very like intonation happens no matter what kind of tonal system you have.
Oh, yeah.
So unfortunately with intonation is very interesting because it's like the phonetics syntax interface where depending on like how you use intonation that can kind of like determine what you mean syntactically. So you can say I saw her at the movies yesterday. I saw her at the movies yesterday. You can kind of shift the focus of the sentence based on your intonation patterns. And I don't think we're going to mess with that all that much just because we do have tone on top of things.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some more, like, intonation is slightly universal in how it patterns. Of course, there are some differences here and there, mostly in things like questions. But since we're already kind of messing with questions, we'll kind of just we won't necessarily, there won't be you don't need a question intonation structure over the sentence because we're going to use a question marker. So I don't know if that makes sense to everybody, but instead of being like, did you see her at the movies yesterday? With a rise, we won't necessarily see that rise at the end of the question because we're going to have a word that just says that it's a question. So you won't necessarily need that type of intonation because there's a word that will mark that question.
Yeah. I do love that call out though, like intonation still existing when you have, tones as part of your semantics, as part of your meanings of the words. I think a lot of people don't think about like, yes, just because you have, maybe the high and low tones that we're talking about here doesn't mean that those wouldn't change based on the structure of the overall sentence. So like what we're talking about, we said this would be basically a phonetic property of the word, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where, it's this letter basically impacts the meaning of the word, but then you still are going to have phonology. So maybe if you have two words right next to each other, it would be kind of like saying a apple. In English, we don't do that. We say an apple. You're going to have that kind of rule with tones as well, where like, oh, maybe this word ends with a high tone, but because it's followed by, two words with a low tone, that's going to now, maybe impact the tone following it and change it to be a different tone. Like that kind of rule can still happen and impact how words are said.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, in terms of syntax, yeah, we'll have a question marking morpheme. What other syntactic goodies do we want? I think because it's already morphologically dense, there's not a whole lot of syntactic complexity we need to encode.
Okay, so if you had like sub clauses and stuff, you would just have like a connecting word and then you would just say it the same as like the main clause.
Yeah. I think having just morphological density would be it does a lot. It does a lot in terms of syntax. You can just kind of keep tacking on stuff.
Right. Yeah, cool. So we talked some about the phonetics, phonology, morphology, syntax.
That's quite a bit.
It's quite a bit. I mean, I feel like the main thing we're missing would be more of like the pragmatics, cultural aspect of it. And then you get more into world building than just like language creation.
Yeah. Same with like
fun.
semantics. We would need to really, build something like a whole culture around it, so to speak.
Cool. Well, I thought that was fun.
Yes, a very good exercise indeed. A pleasant surprise.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. And I think this is probably an episode that, maybe you'll be like, this is a little bit dense, like a lot of just linguistics jargon. But hopefully it gives you a little bit of insight into how we're thinking as linguists, even though this is more of like a game question, just kind of a fun exercise, can maybe give you a little bit more insight into how we're thinking about the different aspects of language as a whole.
Yeah, and I like this is an interesting exercise as well because for those who are maybe interested in like conlangs or language creation, these are the kinds of things that you would have to consider when you're building your language. These are the kinds of things that like J.R.R. Tolkien had to think about or George R.R. Martin had to think about when they were building their languages, right? And some of it comes like very naturally, like saying that we don't allow complex consonant clusters, okay, that's gonna like, put a little spiral effect onto things of like, okay, because we're not allowing this, we're gonna have to add this, and we're gonna have to add that, and we're gonna have to add this. So we happen to use like a lot of fancy words for those things, but with your understanding of like, with even like your basic understanding of linguistic properties, you can kind of create something similar. You just might not be using some of the same terminology EJ and I are.
Yeah, but it is important to think about, the rules and the sounds that are available in your language before you start just like creating words and stuff, because otherwise you're going to be missing those overarching patterns that matter.
Yeah. Like one thing that we haven't explicitly called out, but EJ and I have actively been doing in this process is we've been saying, okay, what like everything, like we can't break all the rules, right? Things like voicing, right? That is something that all languages have to have. And that's not like an abstract linguistic property. That's more of like an acoustic property that we need to be able to hear things, right?
It's like you can't create a language without vowels.
Right. That's just a non-negotiable thing for a language to function. Now, we very much could go in the opposite direction and say, all right, let's break all the linguistic rules, and you would come up with something completely different. But we are still working within the confines of like human capability and capacity, which is something that if you're considering building your own language or conlang or something, you need to consider as well, because they're like, you do have to kind of like work within what is actually possible within languages. You can't just break all the rules. And that would be super fun, but it wouldn't be a viable language.
Definitely. And actually, the one other thing that I always include when I'm thinking about conlanes is deliberately planning the irregularities, because
Yes.
no language perfectly follows all the rules. In fact,
Yes.
there's tendencies for the most common verbs in a language to be irregular. For example, to be and to go. I mean, this is even the case in English, where we have the verb to be becomes I am. Like how on earth does the word am come from be?
Right.
Or to go becomes went instead of I goed. This holds true for plenty of other languages. Like in Spanish, ser for to be becomes soy. Which is not exactly, the norm. Or in Russian, the verb to be isn't normally used at all.
Yeah.
Unless, like, the exception is if you're saying Bob is Bob, like if you're emphasizing that something is itself, in that case, you'll use the word to be in Russian, or if you're using like the past tense. But in the present, you won't usually say the word to be. You'll say like I teacher to say I am a teacher.
Yeah.
And so you need to think about what are those most common, like how are those verbs going to be irregular? What are the other irregulars going to be? Like maybe there's a couple loan words from another language. Maybe there's like just what are the oddities that you're going to pull in? I think that's always an interesting question.
Yeah, because languages, quite fascinatingly, they do have these like different oddities. And to kind of dive into that just for a little tiny bit, indulge me on this small tangent. One would think that it would be disadvantageous to have oddities and irregularities in a language, but it's those things that help people like remember stuff, right? Like think about let's use like the negativity bias, right? You don't remember all of the positive things in your life, but you sure as hell remember all of the bad things in your life, right? Having certain contrasts can make things more memorable in certain ways, and so having irregularities actually benefits the language in ways that a perfectly standard language would not be able to do, right? Our human brains seek out those differences, those oddities, and we can recall those better because they're different.
Mm.
And so it's a terrible thing for when you're learning a language. You're like, why can't everything just be the same? But in like natural language, having those irregularities is advantageous for the language. So don't think that irregularities are a bad thing. They're very, very helpful in like language production and communication and development.
Yeah, definitely. And then, you'll also have people that use different types of language as a way of rebellion, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like deliberately speaking differently from other people. So there's so much fascinating stuff we could go into here,
Yeah.
as far as, language creation and stuff goes. But yeah, hopefully you found that discussion interesting, and we will see you next time.
Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at For the Love of Language. And if you ever have any questions, thoughts, ideas, or opinions, feel free to shoot them at us. We love to hear from our viewers. Thanks for being here, y'all.
Till next time.